Good morning and welcome to Cheche, the show where opinion counts, live on Citizen TV. I'm your host, Udwaka Mimo. It's good to be back with you. Now, about 100,000 students join universities in the country every year. But poor governance, facilities, and rapid expansion, and a host of other challenges have contributed to what some would call a crisis in higher education. Those challenges resulted in the recent closure of a number of campuses. All the responsibility for the troubles and triumphs of higher education sits with the Commission for University Education, or CUE. Its chief executive is Professor David Some, who is today's guest. We also have with us the panel of David Makali and Mutegin Jao in the studio. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the show. We'll start first with a bit of an overview on the state of higher education in Kenya. How would you describe it?
Let me start by saying in the year 2012, a sessional paper, number 14, was put forward that separated very clearly what is higher education into university education and technical and vocational education. So that right now, we actually have two arms. Technical and vocational are responsible for certificate and diploma programs. University education is responsible for bachelor's, master's, and doctorates. So that's really the background where we are.
If the universities are charged with degrees and postgraduate, how comes the universities are teaching certificates
and diplomas
and like Kenya Polytechnic, which now we call the Technical University of Kenya?
Let me answer that very quickly.
Yes.
Njao, before 2012, before the law was separated, that separation was not there. So it has come with a new law, which is called the Universities Act and also the TVET Act. Right now, the law says if you are giving a degree of any kind, the Commission will regulate you. If you are giving a diploma or a certificate, TVET authority will regulate you. And they will look at you as two different areas. So a university is not strictly refused to do diploma, but they would have to do it under the conditions of TVET authority.
So they have to take into account the fact that they're reporting to two separate entities. Okay, so most people would tell you that university education, in fact higher education in general, is in crisis. What is your position on that? Because you've told us about the distinction within higher education. What's the state of university education?
I think we are trying to end that crisis. Let me put it.
So you accept that there is a crisis?
There was a crisis.
There was a
crisis. The crisis was degrees were now being done by colleges. Utegi has just asked universities doing diplomas. There had also been colleges doing degrees under collaboration with universities and so forth. So that even in a village, there was some university doing degrees. We stopped that. We gave the deadline as June, end of June this year. There would be no admissions to mid-level colleges for degree programs. That had been the crisis, because you could imagine degrees being done in really unsatisfactory conditions.
Where did all these problems begin? Because if we go back to the history of higher education in general in Kenya, we know that at some point it was free, that it was the preserve of an elite, that it was desirable, and then all of a sudden you see this proliferation of campuses everywhere. So how did we get to this point where you're now having to retrace your footsteps?
When I was first year, we used to have a course called Economics 101. Economics 101 says supply and demand. It's very simple. There was a demand for university education in Kenya, and there wasn't enough supply. And therefore, then everybody was trying to cash in on available people who want to study. That's where we went wrong. So
what's your mandate now beyond awarding degrees? David?
No, the Prof is being too brief on this matter. The crisis is not just about separation of degrees and diplomas. It is actually a bigger crisis of credibility of Kenyan universities. If you look back in the days, our days or before your days, university, as Udwak has said, was something, quite distinct from the rest. Now universities are everything.
Let me answer what Udwak said first, and then I come to your issue. Yeah. The lack of university spaces made other operators to cash in on it, and that's really the problem. But coming back to the good old days, Even in the good old days of you and me in the university, we had universities in India that were really, really bad. And so we know how universities can get bad. And they can get bad by falling below a standard. By falling below a standard. And this is where we come in now as a commission. We maintain the minimum standards. We will talk later about the closure of colleges. Those colleges have not reached the minimum standards.
We'll come to that, but so your mandate is quality assurance. In what sense?
We assure quality that each institution giving a degree has reached the minimum standard. That's what we call the minimum standards. And that is what we regulate. That any university giving a degree of any kind has met the minimum standard.
I don't know about that quality, that standard. It is not there.
That's the problem.
When I was in university, we used to have people used to be called to talk. In fact, I did education, and we went about 300 students.
Right.
But those students would be divided into groups of 12. After the lecture is given, which is a mammoth thing, like a church, then you go individually every week with your 12 group, and you train with a teacher, or a professor, or somebody, tutorial fellow. That never happens at all. If you go to university today, in fact, you'll be ashamed. There is another young man who is my relative, who came the other day. He's in some college in Mombasa. The fellow cannot even speak English. He speaks Cheche. And there's no quality, absolutely no quality at all.
Actually, the standard is as follows. For somebody to have a first degree, a bachelor's, we look at the number of hours he has to be taught each year for 4 years. And now it's about 1,800 hours for every year. That is made up of lecture hours, which is one-on-one. It's made up of practicals, which is 3-hour practical is equal to 1 lecture hour, or tutorials, which is 2 hours of tutorial. Now, where there are no tutorials, the lecture hours and the practicals make it up. So that in programs like, I'm an engineer by training, a lot of my lecture hours are made up of practicals, not tutorials. But if you are in journalism, a lot of your lecture hours should be made up of practicals.
Actually, practicals as well.
Yeah.
I think the point Mutegi is trying to make is that you have huge classes.
Yeah.
Okay, over 100. You have no one-on-one interaction. I'm sure there are professors who have no idea who their students are. There are students who have no idea who their lecturers are. And so how can you tell us that universities are delivering quality education when they're churning out people who cannot express themselves, whether orally or on paper, who cannot interact, who cannot defend themselves in an argument, and then say that you're addressing the crisis in education?
Actually, university comes from the word universal, universality.
And the universities are now become very polytechnic.
Yeah, and right now in the world, a lot of our graduates are not in a teaching class. They are in an open learning system. We have new programs that we call MOOCs, Mass Open Online Courses.
Okay, so that's the etymology of universities, but the etymology of education is to guide, to lead the way. And that's what being in a classroom or being in an academic setting should do. And our argument, it seems here from the panel, is that university education is failing to do that. It's failing to prepare students for futures. It's failing to prepare students to be independent. It's failing to prepare them for professional engagements.
In fact, what you are describing is not there.
No,
there is open learning.
No, what I'm describing as a universality is there. If you look at a graduate of any of our Kenyan universities who go to do a master's elsewhere, their performance is equivalent to what they do in other countries. That's the point. But in Kenya, we are used to a secondary school. Let me take you to a school like Maranda, for example. It has 10 streams. That is 40 students in each class, 10 times. So it has a 400 class. A lot of Kenyans should wish to see the university if we have 600 students in 60 in each class 6 times. That doesn't really work out for universities. And that's where people always compare what we call a large class. If I have an open course, I have 3,000 students on that course. Okay, I don't meet them face to face, but I conduct those lectures as it is, because it's a university level.
No. You are not telling the truth. No, let me say this. If you are in, say, Karatina University, for example, those facilities, if you are using computers, they are not there. There is no teacher who teaches through laptops and communicating through internet. They're supposed to go to class and read books, hard copy. And you see these days, there is no student with any book. They don't buy books anymore. If anything, they go to the library and rip off books from pages from the library, or photocopy books. So what we are talking about, technology, is not replacing that. It's not there.
I can say one thing. A lot of books in the world now are online. They're actually even on your mobile phone. If you have airtime, you can download any book at the moment. But nonetheless, we regulate the library of every university by asking what is the space available in the library and what is the number of volumes of books that they have, either physical or digital. This is what we regulate.
Prof, in terms of quality assurance, and because the buck must really stop at your commission in terms of the regulation and the quality of education that is being offered by those universities, have you yourself come across the litany of complaints about the quality of education, the quality of graduates coming out, and how is your commission responding to address that, obviously, a national crisis?
We, after the 2012 Universities Act was enacted, we caused to publish regulations. We call the University Regulations 2014. And we also caused to publish University Standards and Guidelines 2014. Those are the instruments we use to regulate the universities. Without naming a name, there is a university that graduated PhD students last year and master students that we got a complaint from the Ombudsman, anonymous complaint, that these degrees were not to the standard. And it's a public university. And we were asked to investigate. And we investigated and we found that they did not meet the minimum standards. And so as a commission, we say these degrees are not recognized. And then we just tell the university that way, and we tell the students involved.
What happened to the students? Because presumably for the university, income generation has overridden the minimum, concerns about quality. But what about the universities who signed up, without any knowledge of this? What happens to them? Actually, they've invested money, they've invested their time.
Actually, it's not so much the universities who don't know. A lot of the Kenyans who go to university don't know what the standards are.
But that's what I'm saying.
And this is the lesson.
That the universities might do this wittingly, but for the students, it's an unwitting decision. You go somewhere, you hear about a name, you see a course that you like, you take it up, and then you come around and say, that degree is invalid.
I give you an example which has been in the press. For example, we closed the university which was graduating students after 4 years. And those students actually did masters and PhD and first degree.
Which university is this? We must name them.
This is the Landmark International University. Landmark at Kimende. Now, this is Kenyans who have trained 8 PhDs, 46 masters, 175 bachelors for 4 years. And you want to tell me they don't know that this university does not exist? This is the Kenyans we have. The
question is, does the commission have its own tools of establishing those quack universities that are and courses that are being offered out there by people, to which people are being admitted, students are being admitted because they are ignorant?
Actually, we always say in our website, we have a list of all the universities that are accredited, and we have brochures that we distribute like this.
Yes.
There are 68 universities in Kenya accredited to give degrees, 37 private and 31 public. And we give that information in all the newspapers every 3 months.
Okay, so the first learning that our viewers can take away from this is that if you're seeking university education, that they should come to your website to ensure that the institutions that they are considering are actually accredited with your commission.
That is the first step. The second step is, even if you are going for a university outside Kenya, in any country in the world, we are the body in Kenya that can tell you if that university is accredited in that country, in the world, because we are the focal point on a network that recognizes universities the world over. Okay. So any Kenyan going to any university anywhere can come to us through an email, through a text message, and get to know that the university they are going to join is accredited.
Okay, that's a huge learning for our people. But David mentions a point about quack universities.
Yeah.
But there's also a distinction, because you did have universities that were operating, but the campuses that you closed because of the failure to meet your standards, there's a difference there, isn't there? between crack, non-existent universities and universities that maybe are failing to comply with 1 or 2 or even 3 edicts from yourselves?
Let me say 3 sentences about how we establish a university. If the university is private, they apply and they are given an interim position. We call it a letter of interim position for 4 years. Before it's chartered, when it's fully
Can they take university students during that time?
Yes, they will take students during that time only to 1 campus. They don't have any, they're not allowed to have campuses. But when a university is chartered, they are allowed to have campuses, but those campuses must comply with the minimum standards of a campus. And
which is what?
Yeah.
Which is listed out in the standards. We have a standards of campuses.
Give us an
now that is why it
standards.
comes. Because then we are finding campuses on 5th floor of a building without space. Is a 1 room, and
But
there
below
are campuses.
there's a bar.
And there are campuses. So what is the criteria used by universities to open campuses? What are the minimum requirements?
The minimum requirement is that a campus is the smallest unit of a university and shall mirror the main campus. That means it has to have an administration office, a person we call a principal of that campus, and all the support that a student wants. It has to have adequate space. It has to have a library. It has to have a playground. Even if they don't own it, they must rent it from existing grounds, so that we have evidence of memorandum of understanding that the students can go for physical services and so forth. So we inspect this.
Now, are there any such campuses? Have you not seen campuses that don't comply with those requirements? Because they're everywhere.
Because we chartered most of the public universities, actually all the public universities in 2012, we had not chartered their campuses. So we are now in the process of doing this. We've done for Nairobi, and you know the story of Nairobi. There were about 8 campuses that did not comply. From next week, we are going to Western Kenya. Nakuru, Narok, Kisii, Kisumu, Kakamega, Kitale, Eldoret, to look at all the campuses. It's our responsibility to the people of Kenya and to the students to make sure that the campuses comply with the minimum standards.
You're going to find very many that don't comply, because I know many that just are on a floor. There is no space, there's no library, there's nothing. People come there to do classes. Are those campuses or just classes that people attend?
When we find those, some universities want to baptize them as teaching centers. We have nothing like that in the law. We will close them. It's our mandate to close them and safeguard the integrity of education.
So what advice would you offer then to students who are enrolled in these teaching centers or in campuses that will certainly, upon hearing, listening to you, fail to meet your minimum standards?
We will ask a student, not only in the campus, even in a college, to ensure that it's accredited. Ask the administrator. That's why we expect the first person in a campus to be a principal. And they should ask that principal if this college is accredited. And if it is, there's a certificate issued by the commission that shows it's accredited.
What recourse do students have under the law if you ask an administrator and you are told that this is an accredited institution, and perhaps, you know, with a certificate which, you know, might have been purchased from River Road or wherever? What recourse do students have if they feel that they have been fraudulently enrolled on false pretexts?
Fortunately, university students are over 18. They have the recourse of the Kenyan full law. They can take that university to court and seek out the rightful.
How are you able to know, in terms of the teachers or lecturers, how are you able to know that the Moi University campus in Nairobi, Moi University, know that they have a campus in Nairobi, that there are teachers there teaching?
The
minimum
standards for a campus for teaching is that if you have a degree program, let's say Bachelor of Information Science of Moi University at Nairobi campus, it must have a thematic leader. A thematic leader is a senior lecturer and above person, one of them, and has to have 3 lecturers. So that's the minimum standard for the people teaching a program in a campus.
You have the name, but the physical people are not there. Because there's a lot of moonlighting. There's no way that somebody can be teaching Moi University in Eldoret and at the same week teaching Nairobi, which is happening every day.
If you look at the standard for appointment and promotion of staff, okay, you call it moonlighting, but we call it also adjunct professor. If Muteki Njau is made to lecture a lecturer and he meets the standards of being a lecturer and he's been listed as a lecturer of Moi University in Nairobi campus, we will accept that because we see the qualifications of Muteki. He fits to be a lecturer, he's listed as a lecturer. We accept that. And we call him adjunct. You are an adjunct professor,
yes.
You are an adjunct lecturer.
Yes, but how do you make sure that he's there? Because the problem is, they are there by name, that's all.
The person who makes sure to be there is an organ we call Senate. It has what we call the academic freedom. If you are a lecturer, as you know, you've been through there, the lecturer controls himself, but he's controlled by Senate. If we go to the extent of saying we want to know if you're there, we're now micromanaging. But the Senate is responsible for the presence of a teacher and the presence of a student in class.
The Senate is sitting in Eldoret, where the university is. The Senate does not sit at the campus.
And that's why we insist that we have a principal of that campus who the Senate should hold responsible.
Okay, fine. So we'll take a break now. This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. Today's guest is Professor David Some of the Commission for University Education. We would like to hear from you, your experiences of university education, higher education even. Our SMS number is 22422, or you can tweet us using the hashtag Cheche.